Hello everyone! Today I have here a true legacy game, Zargos Lords. What to expect from this video, all the game elements and how to play. Before we begin, some background information on the game setting. Zargo is an ancient world, initially dominated only by the knights. Thanks to their military power and magic, they ruled all the 4 continents of Zargo. Later, new powerful races from distant world arrived on Zargo. They began to build their own city and challenge the knights' hegemony. And this is also the goal of the game. The player takes on the role of the one of the Lord of Zargo and fights for the dominion of the entire planet. Zargos Lords, published in the 1979 by International Team from an idea of Marco Donadoni. It's a classic fantasy war game, and this is my copy of the game. I played dozens and dozens of times on this game. I had a lot of fun. It's a beautiful game, classic, but with all the elements the passionate of this kind of game loves. The publisher, International Team, that time published several games. This is the only one that I still own. I don't have any more the box, but I still have the game complete with all his parts. The model token of all the faction. I have even an expansion, Zargos Lords 2. However, the objective today is to explain how to play to the game. But we start from the game component, which is quite straightforward because there are not many. Rulebook, multi-language, black and white, old style. Faction tokens. In the original game there are 4 factions: Monk, Winged, Dragon, and Knights. I have here 2 more factions from the Zargos Lords 2 expansion. We'll talk about this later. The map, this wonderful hexagonal map, which looks like a jigsaw. The game map is an hexagonal grid representing the spherical world of Zargo. It features 4 continents interconnected by cloud bridges, the only possible path through them. The terrain of the map includes grassland, forests, mountains, seas, and magical whirlpools, each of which influences the movement and combat of units. The spherical design also allows players to cross the edge of the map, re-entering from the opposite side. Each faction comes with a flag card and with different model tokens. For instance, these are the knights. The knights have infantry, lords, wizard, archers, and city. Every faction has a different set of units, but each faction has about 50 units of different types. Another game component are these 2 dashboards used to solve the combat. They still spin. One for solve the ranged combat, another one to solve the close combat. These 2 dashboards, they works along with the D6 dice. Here, according to the D6 dice and some factor, we can determine the result. As mentioned before, the scope of the game is world domination. How to achieve it? Conquering as many enemy cities as possible. The game is divided in turns. The game call it months. 25 months is the game limit. Each turn, each player must go through 3 phases: alliances discussion, unit movement, and combat. With some exceptions, some combat can be resolved during the movement phase. The game can be very long because each faction has about 50-60 units, and each faction can move all of the unit every turn and resolve all the fights. So a game with 4 players can last even 8 hours. The game can be played by 2 to 4 players. Each player controls one faction. To really understand how to play, we need to understand how the unit moves and how they combat. Each unit token reports its combat factor on the left and its movement factor on the right. The general rules of the game are pretty simple. Each player moves their unit, then the combats are resolved. Much depends on the type of the race and units you control. I'm not going to explain you every single unit or every race. What is important to understand is that all infantry units fight and move exactly according to their value on the token. Ranged units also behave like infantry. Plus, they can shoot arrows, flames, or visions. The number of hits they get depends on the range of the target and the result of the die, which you can check on this dashboard. Each race has at least one special unit and one lord. Both of these units have special rules. Across all the races, there are 3 ways to resolve combat: melee combat, ranged combat, and casting the vision. We have already said that the dashboard are used to resolve the combat. The logo here indicates the type of combat: flamethrower, arrows, melee, and visions. How do you read it? For flames, arrows, and vision, by crossing the result of a d6 and the distance of the target. For melee combat, by crossing the difference between the sum of all the combat factors of attackers and defenders and the result of a d6. DE means defender eliminated. A unit can spend its movement points to move in any direction, in straight line or in zigzag. Terrain affects movement and combat. Sea, for example, can never be crossed except by cloud bridges. Forests require double movement point to cross, and mountains require 2 full turns to cross. Once a unit reaches a mountain, it stops. On the next turn, it can climb the mountain, and on the next turn, it can complete the crossing. Forests require double movement point to cross. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Close combat is resolved by crossing the difference between the sum of all the attackers and defenders' combat factors and the result of a d6. In this example, we have a winged lord and 2 winged infantry attacking a dragon lord. The total attack value of the 3 attackers is 16, minus the combat factor of the defender, which is 6. The result is 10. So, with the help of a dashboard and a d6, it is possible to determine the outcome of the combat. The defender must retreat 5 hexes in straight line. In the example, the Dragon Lord will be eliminated because none of the 3 available directions are valid for retreat. Each unit has an area of influence that consists of all the hexes adjacent to the unit, and any enemy unit that passes through that adjacent hexes is considered engaged with the unit. However, if the unit is already engaged with an enemy, its area of influence ceases to exist, so other units can pass through it. A unit can attack more than 1 unit at a time, if the difference in combat factor is high enough. Ranged attack, like arrows and flames, can be combined to defeat stronger units. This is achieved by adding hits to defeat units like a Dragon Lord, which requires 6 arrows. Several special units have the ability to move and fight in the movement phase, when moving in a straight line, like this Dragon Serpent. First attack, second attack, third attack. Ranged combat is resolved based on the distance to the target. For example, here we have 2 dragon units against a winged infantry unit. The Dragon Lord can cast flames, and even the Dragon's Flamethrower can do so. So they can do it together. But the number of flames is calculated individually and added together later. For example, this Lord is 1 hexagon from the target, and on a dice roll of 1, he casts 1 flame. This infantry is 2 hexes, and with a dice roll of 4, get 2 flames, for a total of 3 flames. That's enough to eliminate a winged infantry unit, which is then removed from the game. Arrows works the same way, except they can reach farther targets. The visions instead have a range of 5 hexes and always push the enemy to a forced retreat. The game setup is also pretty simple and straightforward. In the case of 4 players, the faction cards are shuffled and randomly distributed across the 4 continents. Second, each faction deploys its own cities on its own continent. Each faction has 4 cities in the base game, which become 6 with the expansion. Cities may be placed anywhere on the faction continent, but not on coastal axes, mountains, boats, magical whirlpools, or cloud bridges, and may not be closer than 4 axes to each other. Then, there are the garrisons, which can be composed of a maximum of 4 units, and the 4 units must be placed face down, so it is not possible to know how powerful the city garrison is. The game time can vary according to the number of the player. With 2 players, it takes about 2 hours. Consider that each faction has about 50 units to move every turn. Before concluding this presentation, I would like to say a few words about the expansion Zargos Lords 2, released about 3 or 4 years after the release of the original. It comes with 3 main changes: 2 new races, Amazons and Arachnes, which are quite nice actually. Secondly, the game time is significantly reduced, only 10 turns instead of 25. And the third thing is the introduction of magical events that each faction can activate at the beginning of their turn. Currently, the game is in the hand of Cobblepot Games, and according to their website, they are working on a new edition. Let's hope for the best. I hope you enjoyed. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and if you want to support the channel, press like and subscribe. Ciao!